Hi, Tony. Thank you for joining us today on today's interview. The main thrust of this is going to be breaking down boundaries. But before we start, how are you? How are things generally?
Hi, Sean. Yeah, I'm good. It's the weekend. The sun is shining here, which is really good. So yeah, looking forward to our talk.
Excellent. So first of all, Tony, just so you can give a kind of overview to our listeners of who you are and what you've done in the game, I just wanted to ask you, how did you start playing? What were your influences? And what have you generally achieved in the game? Can you give us an overview of your playing experience?
Okay. I got into the game probably was about 14 years ago. I live in Brighton, and me and my partner at the time were often going for walks along the seafront in Brighton. And Brighton had two terrains in those days, right on the seafront. And we used to often stop and watch people playing over the wall, one trying to work out, how the game was going on and what was happening. And one day, some of the players from the local club spotted us and invited us to come over and join them, and was looking for a new activity to do in those days, so that we could make, me and my partner could make some new friends, which were our friends, and it gave us an opportunity to explore that. So that was how I first got in the game, and really enjoyed it. The club was incredibly welcoming, and at the time, the main person behind the club was a guy called Ray Ager, who's quite well known in Petanque circles. And he was probably my first influence in the game. He really encouraged me to get involved in the sport, both from a playing angle and also within the club itself as well. So that was my first introduction. Loved the sport and the technical side of the sport and the strategy of the sport, but also loved the social aspect of the game within the Brighton club. I remember going out and playing in my first competition away from the club, which was at the Ada Snowballs competition, which they hold every year at the beginning of the year. And it was my first experience of playing in a outside competition. And I lost every single game during that competition. And I was absolutely distraught and thought, oh, I'm no good at this, I'm going to give up. And I always remember, you probably know him, a guy called Chris Wilcox, in the Southern region. And he was there, and I'd played against him, and he came up to me afterwards because he could see that I was kind of distraught. And he gave me a lot of encouragement, picked up on positive things in my game and some things that I could improve on, but really encouraged me. And that was something I'd never forgotten, and have tried to carry through myself when I'm playing against new players who get beaten heavily or whatever, and giving them lots of encouragement and sort of carrying forward the impact that Chris had on me, which was really positive.
And you've gone on to be fairly successful because you represent your region, don't you? And you're always, as far as I'm aware, you're always quite high up when we play in the interregionals. So your game has obviously gone on and on from that. Could you give us just a quick overview of what you've achieved regionally?
Yeah, I mean, regionally, obviously the interregionals was one of the major things that I enjoy within the sport, and the opportunity to represent my region, Sussex, which was at the time a new region, about 15 years ago when it was formed, was the newest region. And I think in terms of within Sussex, obviously we have our own regional competitions, and I've been lucky to have teams with me that have done really well working with that. But getting promotion from Division 2 into Division 1 for the first time as Sussex was absolutely joyous. And the feeling we had amongst our region, the camaraderie and the sense of achievement was just amazing. And then the following year, everybody, I think, expected Sussex to be a yo-yo team and to go straight down. And we stayed up, and quite convincingly so. So that achievement with Sussex has been was amazing. Yeah,
that's good. And I think you've also won quite a few regional titles. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, I've won a few regional titles, which has been good. Triples and doubles. Singles was the one that took me a long time to crack, because I've never, probably of the different formats, singles was the one I least enjoyed, because I enjoy the team element of the game more. But yeah, finally got the singles title as well, and even shooting champion a couple of years as well.
Oh, amazing! So you've been very successful. And to me, that shows it's quite an important story, because when you first start off in this game, and I remember myself losing quite heavily when I first started playing, is that if people give you the tools to succeed, so Chris came up to him, put an arm around you, who knows, if he hadn't come along that time, you may have given up, or you may have not.
Exactly.
So those positive influences are really, really important, and then you've gone on to be very successful from a playing perspective. So that brings me on to my second question, Tony, because you also are not an important part in the playing zone, but also from a committee perspective. I'm right in thinking that you've held various positions, both nationally and regionally, on committees. Can you give us an overview of the roles you've held? And what I'm really interested to know within that is how difficult it is sitting on committees, how you do manage to get to those decisions, and what you think that your role has been in making sure the right decisions are made.
Okay, there's a lot in that one, Sean. I'll start off with, it started from my local club in Brighton. And I was encouraged by Ray Ager at the time to consider going onto the committee and being nominated to become the club president. And this was very early in my playing career. So I was pretty nervous about putting myself up for that, because I didn't feel I had the experience of the game or the sport as many other people within the club. But I also had some ideas about where the club could improve and could become more open, more inclusive, and expand. When I became president of the Brighton club, we had, I think it was just under 40 members. And then within 2 years of being president, our membership had grown to over 100, which was a great achievement for our club. And that was, I was lucky to have a committee in both of my terms as president that sort of shared my vision for the club and making the club an integral part of the community. So we worked and built really good working relationships with the local council and sports development side of the local council. That enabled us to get some grants from the council, and also the conversion of a building on the seafront into our clubhouse. It also involved working with different aspects of the local community as well, to show to the council that we were part of the community. So we worked with, we did sessions with the deaf community in Brighton and other aspects of community work, just expanding the club and getting us involved in the community. And then following that with the Brighton club, well, also within the Brighton club, To make the club more competitive as well as more open, I introduced a lot more competitions, got us linked with other clubs locally and also in London, the Croydon Club, for example, and having club versus club competitions. That helped improve our competitiveness of the club. And there was always the battle that I think exists in every club between the social and competitive side of the game. And it was trying to keep a balance of both those aspects of the sport for the club, which I seem to do. Was that an
easy task?
It wasn't an easy task. You've always got people who want one and not the other, or feel it's too heavily weighted to one side. But what I did and what I was able to demonstrate was to introduce more opportunities, both from the social side and having fun competitions, fun days, barbecue days, as well as expanding the competitive opportunities as well. And that worked.
So you were able to cater for both, really?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it was an easy ride, but I think we had, as the club, a scope to expand on both sides. So nobody could say we weren't catering for the social side or we weren't catering for the competitive side, because there was room for expansion on both. So it was achievable.
That's really good. So you managed to take on board both sides of the argument and implement something that would make both groups of sets of people happy. So in regards to the national side of things, what position did you hold? I think it was the EPA at the time.
Yeah, it was the EPA. Well, I got involved with the regional committee and was doing a lot of, we had a role called communications officer, and was improving the communications within the region, making sure that our membership were aware of what was going on and aware of what forthcoming opportunities were happening. And about the same time as well, I got invited from a playing angle to join a team to play in the Nationals and the qualifying for the Nationals. And that was through a chap called Graham Elcombe, who invited me to join his team, which I was gobsmacked by at the time, because, you know, I was just a local Brighton, Sussex player, never dreamed of even attempting to play with the big boys. And Graham gave me that opportunity, and that got me involved playing nationally and meeting other players nationally, and also the people that were organising and running the events. And it was actually a couple of people who were on the management committee with the EPA English Petanque Association at the time, who suggested to me that I should consider joining the national committee, which was, again, something I'd never considered. That was for somebody else to do, not for me. Yeah, I listened to them, thought about it, had a chat with some people on the committee, had a chat with the president at the time, who was Mike Pegg, and got proposed and added to the committee. Within 1 year of being on the committee, we had a vacant position as the national secretary, which had been vacant for a little while. And I had experience in previous voluntary work I've done of being a company secretary for a voluntary charity organisation. And again, chatted with Mike Pegg and said, look, I've got some skills, I've got this skill set. What do you think? And put myself forward and got proposed, and was then national secretary for 4 years for the association.
Sounds like your ideal candidate, and I think you did a very good job by all accounts.
That's very kind of you to say.
What challenges did you find sitting on a national committee like that, and what challenges, and also what do you feel your role was in terms of the decision-making process?
I think the challenges, first of all, on a personal level, was initially feeling out of my depth. People who had a huge knowledge again of the sport, a historical knowledge and experience of running the sport and organising the sport, and feeling like, what can I add to this? And that was like an internal feeling maybe slightly inadequate, inexperienced to even be in this position. But then realizing that through previous voluntary work and my professional work, I did have a skill set that I could bring along to the meetings. And to, I think one of my strongest attributes is the administrative side, but also the communication side, and introducing an openness within the committee. So when I joined the committee, I had to ask sort of 4 questions before I could understand anything. And so I think it was quite a battle for Mike Pegg to deal with me initially, because I was asking so many questions because I wanted to understand things. And also Mike Pegg was a bit of a tough cookie, and didn't suffer fools easily, and took me a while to sort of to break through his own barriers. And once I did that, developed a really fantastic working relationship with Mike. And we're very two polar opposite personalities, but together, what we could bring together was actually brilliant. And within the committee, I think my influence on the committee was to make it more open, make it easier for people to discuss things. I was also good at involving people in the committee, because it is daunting when you're sitting on a committee, but making sure that people had an opportunity to have their say and put their things forward. And then one of the things that I really enjoyed about working on the committee was the communication I had with the members, individually, club level, regional club level, and building those relationships. And I think one of the things that helped me as well was there weren't many people on the committee who were playing at the national level, so they weren't known on the playing circuit. And I was, and that I think gave me an advantage, but also could be a disadvantage, because you turn up at competitions and it's, oh, the national secretary's here. And suddenly I wasn't Tony anymore, I was the EPA national secretary. And there was an expectation that come with that. What was the other part of your question?
Well, if you say that about when you turn up to competitions and people didn't just necessarily see you as Tony, but also the national secretary. Did you also feel that in some ways, although I could imagine that wasn't ideal at times, did it also help to bring a connect between players and the governing body? Because sometimes, I think it's much better these days, but sometimes there can be a disconnect. And I think when you have someone who's also playing at a national level, but also holds that type of role, perhaps that you can help bring people together. Do you think you managed that in a way?
It's a difficult one for me to judge. I think I'd certainly like to think so, and I hope I did on some level. How far-reaching that was, I don't think I could judge that myself.
Yeah.
But I can certainly say there were just so many people knew me who I didn't know. And yeah, that I found quite interesting. And it was a great, I really enjoyed working on the committee. And though my title was National Secretary, the things I got involved with were far-reaching from that, and involved running the Euro Cup for quite a few years, and moved on to being given opportunities to manage teams, and also a lot of, there was a lot of just the hard slogging, boring administrative job of being the secretary, arranging meetings, taking the minutes, which is not glamorous, but as anyone who's ever worked on any kind of committee or voluntary organisation, there's a lot of very hard work that goes on by a lot of individuals that doesn't get seen or doesn't get noticed, but is so important in keeping the cogs of any organisation, be it national club or regional level, working. And there's loads of people out there who just do that unselfishly for very little reward or thanks.
All in their own time, yeah, that's absolutely true. And if they didn't, then we would be failed to function. So good on them. It comes across that you played quite an influential role in the progress of our sport. There's one thing that I found interesting, what you were saying, is that you were saying that you did build up a really good relationship with Mike, and I think there's that's absolutely right. And you mentioned about breaking down those boundaries and barriers. How did you manage that? Because my own personal experience of you, Tony, is that you are, in my view, somewhat of somebody that everyone can get on with, a bit of a mediator. You like things to be open and inclusive, which you've already mentioned about that, and making the committees more open and inclusive. How did you manage to break down that initial boundary between the two of you?
That's a really interesting question. I think first and foremost, being me, not trying to be what somebody else wanted me to be, or playing a role, but just being me. I think with my relationship with Mike, I had to prove myself that I was, worthy and capable of holding the position I was putting myself forward for on the committee. So once in post, I could prove that, I was competent, and what attributes I could bring to the role. And that enabled us, as well as having a good working relationship, to become friends as well. Mike, I regard as one of my good friends to this day. But yeah, it takes time. It takes time for I had to, I understand I have to prove myself. Mike had been president for a number of years, and there was this, unknown quantity coming in saying, yeah, I can be national secretary, I can do that. And yeah, having to prove myself. But I think most importantly, with me and with when I meet anybody, is, and it is one of the greatest things of I think of our sport, is the social side of our sport. And I'm a social person, I'm a social animal. One of my weaknesses is that I like to be liked. So I always try to find a connection with someone and build on that connection, so that I build that friendship, that relationship. And I think probably one of the most important things is a sense of humour. And I've always had a sense of humour. I've always had the ability to laugh at myself as well as other people. And the banter in our sport, and that I enjoy, both from playing or just chatting with people on Facebook or whatever, is is one of the reasons I love the sport so much. You can be playing, a really important game at an interregional level, representing your county or your region against another, that you can have such a laugh and an enjoyment while doing it, while still being respectful of each other's play and timing it so you're not using it to put anybody off, but enjoy banter. And I think it was the last time we had the interregional championships, which obviously wasn't last year, it was the year before. And I played a game against a Thames Valley team with Paul Webb and Phil Claydon in the team. And it's one of the most enjoyable games I've ever played in. The humour and the banter during the match from both sides was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, the sense of humour is absolutely key, particularly obviously in the gameplay as well. But when you're holding those types of roles as well, I think that's a massive part of breaking down any potential boundaries or barriers. The message I've taken really from this is hard work, determination, authenticity, a sense of humour. But there's one thing I think you've missed, and I'm going to give you a bit of credit here for, because the one thing that has always been very clear to me as well is that you truly listen to people. And you're listening.
Sorry, did you say something?
Very good, very good. So yeah, there's that sense of humour. But yeah, that you always take on board what other people, you may not necessarily agree, but you'll always take on board what other people have to say, and you don't close that down. That's one thing I've always thought about yourself, Tony, and that is another huge part of breaking down those barriers. You don't have to agree, but it is important to listen and actually hear someone else's opinion. And I think that's all part of the things becoming more open and inclusive, which is one of the things you touched on earlier. And this moves me quite nicely on to the next question I've got, because there must be a reason for it. And I think a big part of what we've already discussed is a part of it. So you've had quite a lot of experience for someone who's relatively fresh to the game, or certainly was at the time. You've had quite a large experience of managing and coaching on the international stage. What was that like from a personal experience in doing that role? And the other question I'm going to ask you to probe here is, why do you think you were asked to do it? What skills do you think that the reason that you were asked to take on those roles? Because they're quite high profile roles.
Yes. It's an interesting question. I never had any thought of managing teams or coaching teams, and it wasn't on my radar at all. It wasn't something I was thinking, yeah, I'd like to do that. And the first opportunity came around, I can't remember what year it was now, but there was, amongst the categories of national teams, there's the Espoirs categories of young men, young women, between the ages of 18 and 22. And there was a team that had, I can't remember if they'd qualified or if they'd been selected now, to represent England for the Espoirs for the young women's category. And I knew two of the players on the team, the other two players I didn't know. And it was actually a couple of players on the team who approached me, who I'd got to know through playing the circuit and playing nationally, and asked if I would consider managing them at the Espoirs Championships that year. And I'd never thought about it before. And I was working on the committee at the time as well. So I was involved on there, and I said, well, I'll thanks for the invite. I'll have a think and I'll have a chat with people. And that's what I did. And that was how it started. So it was actually an invite from players, which I'm quite proud about, that it came from the players themselves. And in fact, every occasion that I've managed a team or an individual at championships, it's always been prompted and initiated by the player or the players themselves. And so that's something I'm really proud about. And I suppose that has to be a reflection on me and my relationship with them, which has been built up through the playing side of the sport. And I think that comes from being me. Again, I come down to being open, to being friendly, to trying to make people feel good about themselves, and good about their play, and being sensitive to people, and couple that with the kind of organisation side of it, which is important when you're managing in terms of the responsibilities and the organisations, is important. And I managed that first Espoirs team, which was Sabrina Seville, Sammy Thatcher, Christina Norris, and Poppy. Christina and Poppy, I didn't know. I had very little time to work with them before going to Santander for the Espoirs Championships. But again, initially I felt a little bit out of my depth. The other managers that I saw from other teams all looked so professional and seemed to really know their stuff. And, you know, I'm no fool. I'm not the greatest player with the greatest experience in the sport. But being a manager isn't necessarily about that. You know, if you look at football, you can be the best footballer in the world. It doesn't automatically make you the best manager. But what I brought to that first team was being able to deal with their stress and the stresses of being in that environment, keeping them calm, keeping them relaxed, keeping them focused. And it was a lot about the kind of sports psychology of things. I'm never going to be in a position to tell somebody how they should play the sport. Most people I've managed are far better players than me, so I wouldn't dream of telling them how to throw a ball or even tactics at times. But it is about the sports psychology side of things, which often gets overlooked. Yeah. And keeping that focus, keeping that team together. And yeah, it built from that. That first championship with the Espoirs, if memory serves me right, was the first time an Espoir team had ever got through the qualifying stages that there were at the time, an English team, and qualified to represent England in the finals, which they went on to do in Dusseldorf in Germany. We came second, runners up to Spain in the qualifying round, made lots of friends and contacts through that. And the four young women, you know, did the country incredibly proud and did themselves incredibly proud, but also put themselves on the European map, as it were, as being, you know, England players are people to look out for.
Absolutely. And you touched on a really important point there. Sports psychology side of things does often get overlooked, but it is hugely important. And on that, when you're managing a team like that, because obviously you're managing a team of four people, how difficult is it managing the different personalities within a team? And how did you go about that? Because there must have been times when people were maybe a bit deflated, things weren't going too well, and you've got so many different personalities within a team. Did you find that tough, and how did you go about it?
That's another really interesting question. With the first team, I knew two of the players really well, Sabrina and Sammy, but Poppy and Christina not so well. It wasn't easy at first, knowing the personalities of people, because two of the players I had not had an opportunity to work with before, and was, you know, almost meeting them for the first time to go to these championships. But through for sort of, the practice sessions, being together, you work out people's personalities fairly quickly. And you also can work out the strengths of the individuals and the team you've got. And often you have a natural leader who's often, like Sammy Thatcher, for example, was a natural leader in that group. She had really good experience, and I could use that experience to help with those players that were less experienced and feeling nervous, anxious about what was coming up. It's I think it's about getting to know and working with the personalities of the people involved, and that isn't always easy. But it's about for me, it was about the communication side of things. And I mean, I think one of the most stressful things I can remember as being a team manager, when you're in a triples tournament and you've got 3 and you've got a sub, is when you make that, if and when you make that first substitution. And the first time I ever did it, I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life, fearing about the reaction of the player I'm going to take off, the reaction of the 2 players that were remaining on, and the reaction of the player coming on. But again, communicating why you're doing it, and the rationale and the reasons for the team really helps. And once you build a rapport with the team, sometimes it's the team making that decision for you. They're coming to you and saying, look, I'm not feeling I'm contributing enough, I think I should come off, and so should come on. And it's building that communication and just making sure people feel comfortable to be honest with themselves and with one another.
And on that, I'm really intrigued with the teams that you have managed, not just that team, but any other teams you've managed. Has there ever been a situation where, for whatever reason, there's been conflict in the team between certain players and you've had to kind of step in and manage that conflict? Or has it all gone relatively smoothly from a conflict perspective? And you don't have to name names or anything, but I'm just intrigued.
I wouldn't dare name names.
Yeah, I'm just intrigued to manage that conflict that does arise, or if it has arisen. I'm really intrigued.
I have experienced it, mainly off the piste, because when you're away, you're staying in accommodation together. You're together for quite a few days, and it's a very different dynamic than spending a few hours on a terrain together, when in your downtime, when you're spending it together as well. And so, it has arisen, and I've had to deal with things, and I wouldn't dare say it's easy to deal with. It's not. But when you're in that role, when you're the manager of the team and you're responsible, particularly with young players and their well-being and safeguarding, you have to deal with it. And so, I had to. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I had to. And again, but I've been lucky that the teams and individuals that I've been lucky to manage have all been very good personalities and very strong, mature individuals, and have had an emotional maturity often beyond their years, which makes that role and task of dealing with sometimes the conflict easier, because of their maturity.
And I guess the same kind of skill set applies, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's still all about communication, listening, and putting an arm around the shoulder, if you like. So suppose, even with the conflict side of things, you're still using those same sorts of skills as you would be in the downtime or the gameplay situation. Still the same.
Absolutely, because you have that responsibility 24/7 when you're away with a team. I think one of the things that I was really pleased with was one year when I think it was with the Espoir team, when we were playing in Santander one year. We were approached by one of the French coaches, and who had actually spoken to Mike Ped, who was officiating the event at the time as well, and had been watching us perform not only competitively as a team, but the dynamic of the group of the 4 players and me as the manager, and had been impressed by what they saw and invited us to come along to the women's competition they have in Pavalis-le-Flots. And we got an invite on the back of that. And that's again a testament to the attitude and maturity of the players themselves that initiated that invitation. And I also observed and spoke to other coaches, and I saw other coaches and saw good practice, also saw bad practice, what I felt was bad practice in some coaching, and felt, I can utilise this, or I can steer clear of that. And you learn on your feet, because you have to, quite quickly.
But in order to learn off the other people, for example, you have to have that openness to learn. So it's important not to be stubborn. If you're wanting to learn, you have to be able to be open to understanding new experiences. That's a really interesting insight, Tony, into the world of managing and coaching, because I can imagine there must be some difficult moments in situations like that. So thank you for sharing that. Coming on to another really important topic, in my view, certainly, is you are an openly gay man. And what are your experiences of being an openly gay man within the Petanque scene? And these are kind of 3 questions, I can come back to them, but have you faced any discrimination in that respect? And is there anything more Petanque can do to be more of an inclusive sport? Or is it the case that actually it's pretty good in that respect? I'm really fascinated to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Okay. In terms of facing discrimination as an open gay man in sport, I've not been aware of any. I've not faced it, or had to confront it. So if there is, it's never sort of crossed my path. Possibly because I'm open and have a sense of humour and can laugh at myself. And having a sense of humour can also be used as quite a good defensive mechanism as well, because you can get the jokes in before somebody else, because you can read their mind, know what they're thinking, and get that joke in quicker than they can. But no, I can honestly say I've never felt or had to confront any discrimination within the sport. Far from it. I think what we were just talking about with my first opportunity to manage the Espoirs, young women, was asked by the team, or individuals in the team, but then it had to go forward to the English Petanque Association committee to decide. And again, I was somebody with no experience of managing teams, but I think my sexuality actually did me a favour, because if you're going to have a group of young, impressionable women, who are you going to use to manage them, to safeguard them in that environment? And being an open gay man was, in many respects, a safe pair of hands from a safeguarding aspect, aside from capabilities of actually managing the team. And so I think that actually, in a strange way, was a positive thing for me. So no, I've never faced discrimination. I'm used to I've heard every joke, every innuendo that you can imagine. Sometimes it can be a little tedious. You think, oh, really? Did you have to say that?
Yeah.
But you roll with it. You don't take it to heart. It's always been, in my experience anyway, within the sport, it's always been with good humour and intent behind it. It's never been malicious.
Yeah.
So no, it's never caused me an issue. And some of the things that I'm proud of with regards to my sexuality was when I first became a club president of Brighton and Hove Petanque Club. I got us linked with a local sports organisation, the Brighton Lesbian and Gay Sports Society, and started a lesbian and gay petanque group with the club, working with BLAGS, as it was called, Brighton Lesbian and Gay Sports Society. And I was overwhelmed by the success of the club. We didn't have enough ball within the club to loan to the number of players that were coming. The first evening, we had about 30 to 40 people turn up for it. And the club and the group met on I think it was a Wednesday evening now, during the summer months, and was hugely popular and hugely successful. And it certainly was the first and possibly the only LGBT petanque club or group within the UK, and it may even be within the world as well. I know there have others have formed since, but I think the Brighton one was the first one of its kind. And that in itself also led to opportunities to play at some European international competitions that are held every couple of years. And so I was able to play petanque in Barcelona very early in my petanque playing career, and obtain a silver medal in the singles. Got beaten by an incredibly good Spanish player, and a bronze in the doubles. And then a few years later in Rotterdam, got a bronze again in the doubles competition.
Wow, I never knew any of that.
Yeah, it's my sexuality and petanque can actually go hand in hand sometimes as well, which is quite good.
Very impressive as well. So what's the name of that games then? What is
the European one is called the Euro Games, and there's also every 4 years they have the world equivalent, which is I think it still goes under the same name as the Gay Games. And petanque isn't always one of the sports that's on. It's like an Olympics, like a mini Olympics. Incredible range of sports and activities, but petanque doesn't always get included. But I'm good friends with one of the women on the World Committee at the moment, and I introduced her to the sport of petanque through the BLAGS group. So I know that she'd always be a keen exponent of supporting and trying to get petanque included in future games, which is fantastic.
That's amazing. I didn't know any of that. That's really impressive. That's really wowed me, actually. So it sounds like there is quite inclusive opportunities for the gay community within the sport. Stuff that I didn't even know about, I have to say. Wow, that's really impressive. And at Petanque England level, is there anything more we could do? How can we encourage more of the gay community to get involved at the Petanque England level? Do you think there's more that we can do to be more inclusive? Because I have to say, the one thing that I really love about petanque is that it is very inclusive. Like, you can be young, old, gay, disabled, and it really doesn't matter at all. So I'd be racking my brains, but perhaps somebody who is openly gay, do you think there is more that can be done to encourage more people from the gay community to get involved?
To be honest, I've not thought about it. It's not sort of been something on my agenda or on my radar. I'm really impressed with the work that the association and individuals like Hassie have done in promoting the sport to women and trying to open it up to women. And there's some fantastic work, in my view, that's being done on that. And maybe there's a template to kind of follow that, you know, if the governing body does decide that it wants to open up the sport and try to attract people from LGBTQ into the sport, maybe there's something we can do as a governing body to positively encourage that and provide opportunities. But you need, you know, I'm not the only gay person in the sport, and there are lots, not lots, but there are, I've met a few men and women in the sport that are open and out, and maybe that's something that can be or could be looked at. One of the things I found is that, particularly at a club level, when looking for funding, often when you're looking, you know, either local council funding or Sport England funding or whatever, is presenting a package for your funding or grant application of how you operate as a governing body or as either at a club level. And yeah, I mean, being inclusive is really important, but it's got to go beyond just saying the word, we're an inclusive sport, anybody can play. You've also got to be actively encouraging everybody to play, and the work, like I've said, with the women's side of the sport has been quite wonderful, and
Absolutely.
I hope that continues. There's some really good personalities behind it,
and a lot has been achieved in that side of things, so maybe something similar could be achieved with the LGBTQ community. And I think that's given some really interesting food for thought, because if we've made quite a success in being more inclusive with the women's side, so I don't see why there is any reason where we could progress that further. So that's really interesting. The one question I was going to ask you, if anyone's listening, if anyone wanted to try and secure a grant from the local authority for funding Petanque-wise, would you be happy for them to contact you to find out how to do it and how to go about it?
It's a long time since I've been in a position where I've had to do that. Yes, of course I'd be open. I wouldn't dare say that I'm any expert at it. The knowledge and experience I've had has been at a very local level, and I've been in a very privileged position where I built a really good working relationship with some of the influential people within our local council, and really lucky in Brighton and Hove to have a council that really supports the promotion of active lifestyles and sport, to such an extent that they've built terrains on the seafront for the public to use, which is not bringing in money for them at all. They're just providing that facility.
And are they well used?
Oh yeah, unbelievably so. Particularly during this lockdown period, actually. The last year, I think there's so many people, for one reason or other, are more available during the day than they were, whereas the terrain would be used summer evenings and weekends. It's now used every day, all times of the day, and loads of people are down there. It's a public terrain. It's open to anybody, and I'm absolutely amazed by just how many people are down there playing.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's brilliant. I'd love to do something like that where I am. So hopefully that'll that'll come to fruition. That's really, really interesting. And then really the final thing I wanted to cover with you was from a mental well-being perspective, because you've given us a really good insight into, you know, managing personalities and breaking down those boundaries. So from your perspective, how important do you feel mental well-being is in terms of the sport in general, but also what coping mechanisms have you learned in gameplay? So when the chips are down, things are not going as you expected, what coping mechanisms have you been able to put in place?
I mean, mental well-being is obviously, it's getting a lot more publicity over the last few years than it's ever had done, and is really high profile during you know, the last 12 months of COVID. And it's incredibly important. And I think Petanque, for me as an individual, it's a fantastic bit of therapy, because it gets me outside, in not always in sunlight, but outside in the open air, fresh air. It's one of the most social sports I think you can play.
Absolutely.
So it brings that social aspect, and I think that's one of the things that, you know, I think all Petanque players at the moment are not only missing playing the sport, but in the game, but are missing the individuals, the friendships that they've built up over the years, and having that social contact. So Petanque brings that on both levels, and it's fantastic with that. Moving on to your other part of your question, I think if you've got a level of emotional intelligence, you can recognise when somebody might be going through a difficult time, and that difficult time can be completely unrelated to the sport or the game that they're playing in, or it literally can be at the moment when they just play a bad shot or do a bad point, and it just throws their mind. And it's having that emotional awareness of that and spotting it with people. And I have to say, with the teams that I've played in, one of the most useful tools that I've employed and other people have employed with me is game humour. Is to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. You know, when you're shooting to win the game and you hit the wrong ball, you get the wrong rebound, and you end up, instead of winning the game, giving your opponents 5 points when you were holding 3. What can you do? What can you say? You can't say, oh, bad luck, because that ain't going to help the person. Right. So my strategy with the teams that I've been in, and the teams I've been in have always been with friends, is that you use the humour, the banter, you take the mick out of the situation, and you laugh about it, and that diffuses so much of the tension, not always, but often, that someone can be facing. I need that reciprocated with me, because I'm a competitive player, and I want to do my best, and if I'm not doing my best, I get down. So I need that kind of reciprocated with me as well. But it's also, there's a wider aspect of sort of well-being and mental health, and that is that, you know, we're all human, we all have lives outside Petanque, we all have different stresses and things happening in our lives that affect us at a personal level. And aside from being supportive within the sport and within the game, it's about the friendships and the relationships you build with people, and having that awareness and building that support and openness with people, within Petanque, but outside of playing Petanque. And, you know, the work that you're doing with these interviews, and that David Plumoff has done as well. I mean, David is someone who's in my estimation, has just gone up so high. I admire the man so much.
Absolutely.
Because of his openness and his honesty about the battles he has. And, you know, he's quite open and publicly open about it, which is a brave and almost dangerous thing to do at times. But I've got nothing but respect for him for doing it, because it's he's helped me talk about my inner demons that I have at times, and I'm sure he's helped lots of others. And you know, these last 12 months have been an incredibly difficult time for so many people on so many different levels, and I feel personally that I've coped really well during the period, and I've lots of sort of coping mechanisms I've done for myself to help me see myself through this time, because I live alone, so there's isolation of living alone. I'm working from home as well, so there's the isolation of working from home. And we all need that support from time to time. And a few weeks ago, I had a little bit of a wobble, as I call it. It's only the second time I've had a wobble during this COVID time. And I put something up about it on my Facebook, just saying, oh, I've had a bit of a wobble. And it wasn't a cry for help or anything like that. It was just a statement of fact. I've had a wobble, but, you know, I've just got on my cross trainer. I've just done 20K and I'm feeling really good now. But the response I got from my group of friends on Facebook, and a huge proportion of them are Petanque related, people I know through our sport. And that response was quite overwhelming, but incredibly heartening. And the power of somebody like David opening up and just saying, I'm going through a difficult time, me just saying, oh, I'm having a wobble, allowed so many people I know to either inform me publicly on my Facebook page of difficulties they were having, or privately, the number of messages I got from people saying, you know, this is happening to me now, this happened to me before. And it was really a rewarding experience for me that people were opening up. So, yeah, we love our sport, we love the competitive side, we want to win, but I call it the Petanque family. My Petanque family couldn't ask for better. Amazing bunch of people, genuinely, truly supportive of one another.
Mm-hmm.
Get on the train, we want to thrash each other and beat each other to a pulp. Yeah, but we are incredibly supportive of one another. And it's a fantastic aspect of our sport and the people involved in it.
Absolutely, could not agree more. I don't know what I'd do from a mental health perspective if Petanque didn't exist, to be honest. That camaraderie, that friendship, that everything to do with it. It's one of the reasons why I choose Petanque over any other sport, to be perfectly honest. And I'm quite a sporty person, but Petanque would always come top of my list. Yeah, you have that competitive side, of course you do, but there's a lot more to it than that, and you've kind of hit the nail on the head with that. And absolutely kudos to David. I think it is important to mention that, because he has given the opportunity for people to open up more about their, you know, Petanque aspect side of things. He's been hugely influential in that, definitely, but also from the mental health perspective, people are more willing to open up and talk about things. So what he's trying to achieve is fantastic, and that openness and honesty. So well done to him. But also thank you, Tony, for being so open with everything that, you know, your own experiences and those challenging times and breaking down those boundaries. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to kind of end it on that note. And the one thing I'll say to anyone listening is Tony Mann is an absolutely fantastic individual, top man, and he's brought a hell of a lot to our game. So I hope everyone's enjoyed today. And thank you, Tony, so much for joining me and discussing everything that we have.
Thank you, Sean. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate.
Thank you.
Cheers.